Trevor Hanley arrived early for the grief support group because arriving early meant he didn't have to watch the room fill in. It meant he could choose a spot where nobody would accidentally make eye contact for too long, where the chairs were close enough that a person's voice could reach him, but far enough that hands wouldn't touch without permission. The community center smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet, a mix that always reminded him of hospitals and waiting rooms, places where time felt sticky and nobody's life looked like it was moving forward. He sat with his back to the wall and his feet planted hard on the floor, as if he could keep his body from betraying him by staying perfectly still. His phone was face down on his knee. He told himself he didn't need it. He told himself he wasn't checking the time every few seconds. He told himself a lot of things. When the facilitator, Ms. Larkin, walked in with her folder and her calm voice, Trevor felt the same brief surge of irritation he always felt when life refused to be simpler. Ms. Larkin said the group's guidelines like a ritual. One person speaks at a time, no advice that sounds like dismissal, no fixing other people's grief because grief wasn't a broken appliance. Trevor nodded even though nobody was looking at him. Tonight was supposed to be a quieter night. That was what the sign-up sheet said. Theme: learning to carry what you can't put down. He'd chosen it because it sounded like something you could do with your hands. Carry. Put down. It was the kind of language that pretended pain had weight you could measure. He'd been carrying his breakup like a weight for months. Not just the breakup itself, the weeks leading up to it. The last conversation that had felt polite on the surface and ruined underneath. His ex, Owen, had left like someone returning library books. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just a slow, careful withdrawal. Trevor still remembered how Owen had looked at him, not unkindly, worse than unkindness. Like Trevor was a good man who had made the wrong guesses. They'd been together for 4 years, long enough that their habits had blended. Trevor had known Owen's sleep schedule the way you knew your own. He'd known how Owen liked his coffee, how he folded towels, how he flinched at certain jokes because there were old wounds under his humor. Trevor had believed that because he'd seen the best parts of Owen, he could earn the rest. He believed love was something you built slowly, brick by brick. Then one day Owen had stopped building. Trevor didn't talk about it much in the group. He listened. He used other people's words as a mask for his own silence. He said things like, "I've been trying to notice when I spiral," or, "I'm learning to accept the quiet." He hated how safe his phrasing was. He hated how careful he sounded. He hated that he could be accurate without being honest. A few chairs in front of him, someone laughed softly at a late arrival. Trevor kept his eyes on the floor. He practiced not reacting. He practiced being an observer of life rather than a participant. Then the chair beside him scraped, just a small sound, but it made his spine tighten like a rope being pulled. Trevor's head stayed still, but his awareness turned. A man sat down without making a show of it. The man's movements were quiet, controlled, like someone who had learned that noise got noticed, and noticing could lead to judgment. Trevor caught sight of the man's hands first. Long fingers, nails trimmed clean. Hands that looked like they used to work carefully with tools. Hands that didn't fidget the way Trevor did when he was trying not to panic. Trevor told himself to ignore it. He told himself it didn't matter. But names mattered to him. Not because he needed to know them, because he needed to not know them. Knowing a stranger's name created a bridge, and bridges required footing. The facilitator started with a grounding exercise. Everyone was asked to take a breath and name one thing they could feel, something present, something real, something not connected to the past. Trevor focused on the hard edge of the chair arm and the weight of his jacket. He tried to name it like it was neutral. The jacket was just fabric. The chair arm was just wood. His body didn't need to be a courtroom for memories. When it came time for introductions, Ms. Larkin said, "You can share your first name and what brought you here, only if you feel comfortable." The room shifted with that gentle, cautious energy people have when they're deciding how much of themselves to show. Trevor expected the man beside him to pass. He expected him to be quiet and polite, and then fade into anonymity like Trevor did. The man beside him didn't fade. "Cal," he said, voice low, slightly rough, like he hadn't used it much today. "I'm here because grief doesn't care if you think you're ready." Trevor felt the words catch on something inside him. Grief wasn't always about death, not in a room like this. Grief could be the body mourning what had been lost. Grief could be love that had nowhere to go. Cal added, "And I've been pretending my loss is smaller than it is." Trevor's throat tightened. He swallowed hard and felt his jaw scar tug faintly, like his skin remembered every time he tried to keep himself from making noise. Trevor waited for the moment to pass. Then it was his turn. He had practiced his line. It was safe. It was the version of himself that wouldn't draw attention. "My name is Trevor," he said, and his voice sounded a little steadier than he felt. "I'm here because I keep replaying the last months. I don't know how to stop." He expected silence, maybe a gentle nod. He didn't expect Cal's eyes to lift just enough that Trevor felt seen, not stared at, not pitied. Seen. Cal didn't look away quickly. He didn't look hungry for Trevor's pain. He looked like someone listening for a frequency he recognized. When the introductions ended, the group moved into sharing circles. Ms. Larkin asked people to choose one prompt from the cards on the tables. Trevor reached for a card without looking. He picked the first one his fingers touched. The prompt read, "What do you wish someone had told you about the first weeks after your world changed?" Trevor's hands went cold, because he knew exactly what he would have wanted to hear. He would have wanted someone to say that losing Owen wouldn't make him unlovable. He would have wanted someone to say the pain wasn't proof that he'd failed. But he couldn't admit that kind of thing out loud. A man across the circle, Milo Santos, shared first. Trevor didn't know Milo's story, only that Milo had a way of speaking like he was carrying something fragile and didn't want to drop it. Milo said, "I wish someone told me it's okay to miss them even when they hurt you." Trevor felt his chest tighten again, but this time he didn't push it away. He let the feeling exist without negotiating. It was there, pain, but also truth. Then Ms. Larkin gestured to Trevor. Trevor looked down at his prompt card. He stared at the printed words until the ink seemed to blur. He could keep his mouth closed. He could be the quiet version of himself. He could say, "I'm learning," and let the group move on. But Cal's presence beside him made avoidance feel heavier. Cal hadn't spoken to take up space. Cal had spoken like he wanted to set a lamp in the room, something that could stay lit even if the conversation got hard. Trevor exhaled. He said, "I wish someone told me I wouldn't stop being me just because I lost someone." The sentence fell out of him with a kind of exhausted honesty. He could feel his face flush. He could feel the urge to undo it. Then Cal turned slightly toward him and said, "That's not a small thing." The words were simple, but they landed like a hand placed gently on Trevor's shoulder. No squeezing, no forcing. Just contact that said, "I heard you." Trevor stared at the floor again because that was what he did when his feelings threatened to run away. The group ended with the closing ritual, one affirming sentence you could take with you. Everyone was asked to choose something they could repeat later when their mind started spiraling. Trevor chose, "I can keep living even when it hurts." He wrote it on the slip of paper Ms. Larkin handed out. Cal's voice carried as he shared his sentence. "I can miss them without turning it into self-hate." Trevor's pen slowed. He looked at Cal, really looked this time. Cal had a calm face, but his hands were clenched just slightly, as if he were holding back a tremor. The meeting ended. People gathered their things with the careful choreography of those who didn't want to linger too long and risk saying the wrong thing. Trevor stood with the intention of leaving immediately. His body had already decided what to do. But then Ms. Larkin spoke softly to Cal. "Cal, can you stay after? I want to talk to you about resources for older losses. You mentioned grief that doesn't feel like it has an end." Cal nodded. He looked toward Trevor for a moment like he was checking whether Trevor needed help finding the door. Trevor couldn't decide if the look was an invitation or an apology, so he left. He walked outside into the cool night air, the parking lot lights making everything look flatter than it felt. He sat in his car, hands on the steering wheel, and tried to breathe through the ache that had been there all along. He told himself Cal was kind. That didn't mean anything. He told himself kindness was a temporary relief. It didn't turn into anything real. He told himself his heart had already used up its future. For a while, he believed those things. Then a text buzzed. He didn't see it right away. He kept staring at the windshield as if ignoring the phone could keep his life from changing. But the vibration came again, persistent. He picked up his phone. It was from an unknown number. Cal Mercer. Hey, sorry if this is weird. You didn't have to share as much as you did tonight, but you did. If you want, coffee sometime this week? No pressure. Trevor read it 3 times. The first reading made his stomach tighten like he was bracing for impact. The second made his chest ache with a longing he didn't want to name. The third made him angry, not at Cal, but at himself for wanting it. Because he didn't do coffee sometime, he didn't do no pressure, he didn't do being someone's possible. He typed, thanks, I'm not really, then deleted. He typed, sure, then deleted. He sat there until his breath felt thin. Finally, he wrote, I can do coffee. Tomorrow, maybe? If you're still up for it. He hit send before his courage could change its mind. The next day, Trevor wore clothes that didn't feel like armor but still felt like they belonged to him. He chose a gray sweater and jeans, something plain enough that it didn't ask for attention. He arrived 5 minutes early, which meant he arrived early enough to watch the shop's front door and let anxiety build. He didn't see Cal right away. The shop was small, the kind with shelves full of mugs and a chalkboard menu that changed with seasonal specials. The air smelled like espresso and cinnamon. It was warm inside, a comfort that felt almost suspicious. Trevor sat near the window because he needed an exit even if he didn't plan to use it. When Cal walked in, Trevor noticed the way Cal's eyes moved. Quick scan, then soften. Cal didn't sweep the room like he expected to be judged. He searched for one familiar pattern, as if he were trying to find a safe path. He spotted Trevor and approached with a cautious smile. Trevor, Cal said, and Trevor felt his name land like something solid. Cal wore a dark jacket and a knit beanie pushed back. His hair was a little messier than it had been in the group, like he'd been living instead of waiting. He carried a paper bag from somewhere else. Maybe he'd forgotten a detail and gone back. I grabbed the wrong thing for you last time, Cal said when Trevor raised an eyebrow. I mean, when we met. I didn't grab anything, I just... Cal's expression tightened, then relaxed. Sorry, I'm rambling. I brought you a muffin. Trevor blinked. You didn't have to. Cal set the bag down carefully like the muffin might bruise. I know, I wanted to. It's blueberry. Trevor hadn't told Cal anything about his preferences. He hadn't confessed that blueberry was the flavor he liked when he needed a small sweetness without demanding a whole celebration. So either Cal had guessed, or Cal had listened harder than Trevor expected. Trevor's throat burned with something that wasn't just gratitude. They ordered drinks. Trevor chose tea because caffeine made him too aware of his own heartbeat. Cal chose coffee like it was an everyday ritual rather than a mood stabilizer. For the first few minutes, they talked around the edges. They discussed the community center. They discussed how difficult it was to sit in a circle and not feel like your pain was being measured against other people's pain. Trevor asked, "What was it like for you at first?" Cal held his cup with both hands. His knuckles looked slightly dry, like he'd been outside or working with his hands. It was humiliating, Cal said, and his honesty was blunt enough to make Trevor flinch. Not because the group was wrong, because I kept feeling like I should be farther along, like grief was a race and I'd failed at it. Trevor's lips parted. He didn't mean to speak, but he did. Owen used to say I was good at surviving, like it was a compliment. Cal tilted his head. Surviving is a skill, he said, but it can become a cage. Trevor stared at his tea. He left anyway. The words were heavier than he expected. Cal didn't recoil. He didn't look away. I'm sorry, he said. Did you know he was leaving before he told you? Trevor wanted to answer with something smooth. He wanted to say, no, it was sudden. He wanted to hide the details that made his own mind feel like it had betrayed him. Instead, he heard Owen's voice in his memory, the way Owen had started using fewer words, the way he'd been late more often, the way their bed had become a quiet, separate island. No, Trevor said, but I noticed, and I told myself it didn't mean what it meant. I kept giving him time. I thought love was still building. Cal's gaze softened. That's a kind of devotion, he said. Trevor looked up sharply. Devotion doesn't fix it. Cal nodded. No, but it tells the truth about how you love. There was a pause, not awkward, just full. Trevor realized he was waiting for the moment Cal would make a joke to lighten it. Cal didn't. Cal let the silence hold the weight without collapsing into pity. Trevor felt something in him shift. Not healed, not fixed, but less alone. After coffee, they walked outside together. The sky was bright in the way it gets right before evening, like the day still wanted to be kind. Cal slowed his pace when Trevor's steps matched his. It was subtle. It was the kind of adjustment you only noticed if you'd spent a long time learning to move carefully around someone else's needs. When they reached the crosswalk, Trevor said, I shouldn't have said what I said in group. Cal's eyebrows rose. About not stopping being me? Trevor nodded. It made me feel exposed. Cal's answer came quickly. Good. Trevor blinked, startled. Cal smiled a little, gentle. Exposed doesn't have to mean unsafe, he said. Sometimes it means you're real. The light turned green. They crossed without rushing. Trevor felt Cal's shoulder nearly brushing his, and he didn't move away. For that night, Trevor allowed himself to imagine something he'd told himself he didn't deserve. The possibility of someone staying. But imagining was dangerous. Trevor knew better than to get greedy. The next week, he returned to the group. He arrived on time this time. He did it to prove to himself that Cal hadn't unsettled him enough to make him slip back into his old habits. When he walked in, he saw Cal already seated. Cal's posture was relaxed, but his hands were still. He had the habit of preparing for something hard. Cal looked up. The relief on his face was almost immediate, and Trevor felt embarrassed by how much it meant. Milo Santos joined them a few minutes later, carrying a packet of tissues like it was part of his uniform. Milo's kindness was a kind of steady weather. After Ms. Larkin asked everyone to share what they were carrying today, Trevor and Cal ended up in the same sharing segment. Ms. Larkin said, Sometimes grief is quiet and sometimes it surprises you. Who wants to begin? Silence spread, thin and cautious. Then Milo spoke. I had a day this week where I smelled laundry soap and suddenly I remembered washing clothes with my ex. And I broke in the grocery store, like out of nowhere. I felt ridiculous. Trevor felt his stomach twist. He knew that kind of surprise, the memories that came like unwanted guests. Cal's turn came next. Cal cleared his throat. I thought I was doing better, he said. I thought I had accepted that my partner was gone. Trevor's breath stalled. Partner was gone. Gone as in death, not as in leaving. Trevor's mind tried to reconcile Cal's gentle presence with a grief that had a different shape. Cal continued carefully, as if he were choosing each word to avoid cutting himself. But then his birthday hit. I drove past his favorite diner and I couldn't breathe. I pulled over and I just sat there. Trevor looked at Cal. Cal's eyes shone, but his voice held steady. Trevor understood suddenly why Cal had chosen the theme card. Learning to carry what you couldn't put down. Trevor's turn came after Cal. He didn't want to speak. He wanted to listen. He wanted to stay hidden in other people's truths. But the room had shifted, and now Trevor felt like if he didn't share, he would be letting himself freeze again. Trevor said, Mine is different. I didn't lose Owen to death. I lost him to distance, to choices, to a door that closed slowly instead of slamming. Milo nodded gently like he understood the nuance. Trevor continued, surprised by his own honesty. There are moments when I get angry at myself, like I should have known earlier. Like if I had been more everything, he would have stayed. It's humiliating. Cal's voice came softer now. It's not humiliating, he said. It's love trying to make sense. Trevor's eyes burned. He wanted to say, thank you, but thank you felt too small. He wanted to ask Cal questions. He wanted to know how someone became someone who could talk about loss without drowning. But a part of him still believed that closeness required a contract he didn't know how to sign. After the meeting, Cal lingered near the refreshments table. Trevor lingered too, pretending he was deciding whether to take a cookie. Milo waved at them and went to talk to Ms. Larkin. Cal turned to Trevor when Milo stepped away. "Can I ask you something?" Cal said. Trevor nodded. Cal's gaze held steady. "Do you still miss him when you're angry?" Trevor's mouth went dry. "Yes," he said, "and I hate that I do." Cal nodded like the answer mattered. "That hate doesn't get to decide who you are," he said. Trevor stared at Cal, and suddenly he wanted to tell the truth he'd been keeping in a locked drawer. He said, "I was the one who came out to Owen first. Not in a big dramatic way. He already knew, but I still made it official. I still wanted him to choose me out loud. I thought if I did that, he would never want to go back." Cal didn't flinch. "And when he left," Cal said carefully, "it felt like he went back." Trevor swallowed. "It felt like I handed him the key and then he threw the lock away." Cal's face softened with something like pain. Trevor saw it and realized Cal wasn't only listening for comfort. Cal was carrying his own grief and still offering Trevor space in it. Cal's voice dropped lower. "I learned something after my partner died," Cal said. "Grief can make you believe love is a transaction. Like if you suffer enough, you earn safety." Trevor's heart pounded. "And you don't," Cal continued. "But you can still choose love when it comes back to you." Trevor wanted to respond, but he couldn't find language that didn't sound like desperation. He settled for a simple question. "Have you dated since he passed?" Cal's eyes flickered, hesitation, then honesty. "I tried," he said, "but I kept expecting the next person to be a replacement. And that's not fair. My partner isn't replaceable. He's his own story." Trevor's throat tightened. Cal added, "Owen isn't replaceable either, but he can be part of your story without controlling your future." Trevor didn't know how to accept that thought without fearing it might be a lie. Still, the idea settled into him, slowly, like warm water. In the weeks that followed, they became familiar in ways that didn't look like romance from the outside. Trevor started arriving early because it made Cal's wait shorter. Cal started saving Trevor a corner seat because he knew Trevor needed a wall. They traded small details they didn't have to trade. Cal's habit of reading the group prompts twice before sharing, Trevor's habit of tapping his thumb against his cup when he was trying not to shake. Milo became the third thread in their slow weaving, making jokes that weren't jokes but invitations. Milo teased Cal about the blueberry muffin, saying he suspected Cal had been hoarding emotional snacks since the minute Trevor arrived. Trevor laughed once, then clamped down on it like laughter might crack him open. But Cal's smile didn't fade. One night, Ms. Larkin asked the group to do an exercise called "What I Wish They Could See." It was meant to help people recognize their own growth. Trevor froze when Ms. Larkin's voice floated through the room. He didn't want to write to Owen. He didn't want Owen to become an audience. He didn't want to think Owen could see him from whatever distant place breakups put people. But Cal turned his paper over slowly, like he was bracing for a storm. Milo sighed, not in defeat, but in compassion. Trevor picked up his pen. He wrote anyway. When the writing exercise ended, Ms. Larkin invited people to share if they wanted. Trevor didn't raise his hand. Cal did. Cal said, "I wish my partner could see that I stopped punishing myself for living." Milo shared next. He said, "I wish he could see that I didn't become a bad person after he left me. I just became a person who needed time." Trevor's turn came after Milo when Ms. Larkin asked if anyone wanted to share. Trevor thought about skipping. He thought about how Owen's last month had felt like a slow disappearance, how Trevor had begged with kindness instead of words, how he'd held back his own anger because he didn't want to scare Owen away. He thought about the words he'd written. "I wish Owen could see that I loved him even when it hurt," Trevor said at last. "And I wish he could see that it didn't mean I should stop loving myself." The room didn't react with shock. They reacted with recognition. Cal looked at Trevor like he was holding a fragile thing. Then, as if the air couldn't wait any longer, something shifted. After the meeting, Cal walked with Trevor to the parking lot. The sky was clear. Stars were visible in small, bright pins. Cal hesitated by his car, hands in his pockets. "I need to tell you something," Cal said. Trevor's stomach tightened. "Is it bad?" Cal's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "No, it's just, I didn't realize I'd want to know you. I didn't realize I'd get attached." Trevor blinked. "We're not," he started. Cal cut him off gently. "I don't want you to panic," he said. "I'm not asking you to be anything. I think you deserve the truth." Trevor's hands curled around his keys. Cal looked toward the dark line of trees at the edge of the parking lot, then back at Trevor. "I'm not new to this building," Cal said. "Not really. I used to come with someone, before he died." Trevor felt a slow coldness settle in. "You said partner." "I did," Cal said, voice careful. "But I didn't tell you the partner's name. I didn't share because it felt like bringing him into a room where I was still trying to be a whole person." Trevor's heart thumped. Cal continued. "His name was Daniel, and I didn't come here for grief support after he passed. I came here because Daniel had questions." Trevor stared. Cal took a breath. "Daniel was closeted when we met. He didn't tell everyone. He told me in private, and we loved each other as much as we could. But when he died, the world didn't know him. I kept waiting for people to say his name with respect. I kept feeling like he disappeared twice, once in life, once in death." Trevor listened, stunned by the way Cal carried his story, open enough to be real, guarded enough to protect himself. Cal looked at Trevor, and his expression was almost pleading. "I'm telling you this because you matter to me. Because I don't want to be another man who holds back and then leaves you guessing." Trevor's throat burned. He said, "I get it." Cal's eyebrows lifted. "You do?" Trevor nodded slowly. "Owen didn't come out all the way, not to family, not to friends. He was supportive in private, then cautious in public. I thought we were building a future. Then he left, and I realized he'd never truly decided." Cal swallowed. "That's brutal," he said. Trevor let out a shaky breath. "Yeah." There was a pause where both of them seemed to realize the same thing. They had been telling each other their pain without asking for permission to hope. Cal's voice softened. "I'm scared," he admitted. Trevor blinked hard, fighting back tears that didn't feel dramatic, just human. "What kind of scared?" Trevor asked. Cal's gaze held his. "Scared that if I love you, you'll realize I'm not a solution. I'm just a man, and you already learned what happens when someone stops choosing you." Trevor felt the words hit like a memory. He wanted to tell Cal that he wasn't looking for a savior. He wasn't looking for a replacement. He didn't want to be rescued. But he was looking for a kind of truth he hadn't been offered before. Love that stayed. Trevor's voice came out rough. "I'm scared too," he said. Cal waited. Trevor said, "I'm scared that if I let myself want you, I'll make it worse. I'll turn love into a test. I'll demand proof. I'll punish you with my fear." Cal's face softened in a way that made Trevor's chest ache. Cal stepped closer, just enough that Trevor could smell his cologne, something clean and faintly woody. Cal didn't touch him. He waited, giving Trevor room to choose. "I don't need you to be perfect," Cal said. "I need you to be honest." Trevor nodded, a small movement that felt like it came from deep inside. Cal's eyes lowered to Trevor's mouth and then back up to his eyes. "Can I do something?" Cal asked. Trevor held his breath. Cal reached out, slow, giving Trevor time to pull away. His hand hovered near Trevor's sleeve, not grabbing, not claiming. Then Cal touched Trevor's wrist lightly, just a brush of skin to skin. Trevor didn't move away. His body accepted the contact the way it accepts warm air after being cold for too long. Cal's thumb didn't linger. Cal withdrew his hand and tucked it back into his pocket like he'd done it with respect. Trevor felt shaken by how much that small gesture mattered. He whispered, "What are we doing?" Cal's mouth curved faintly. "Something honest," he said. "Something slow. Something with consent." Trevor let out a laugh that was more air than sound. "I hate how much that makes sense," Trevor admitted. Cal smiled, and it looked like relief. They drove home separately, but the distance between them felt smaller than it had for months. Over the next month, Trevor learned new things about himself. He learned he didn't spiral every time he thought about Owen. The thoughts still came, but they didn't drag him under as quickly. He learned that grief didn't vanish. It changed shape. It became less like a wound that needed constant attention and more like a scar you touched sometimes when you remembered to be gentle with yourself. He learned Cal was not a distraction. Cal was a mirror, showing him what he deserved. And then, on a Thursday that started like any other, Milo asked them to meet early. Milo waited by the community center entrance with a paper bag and a tense smile. "Guys," Milo said, "we need to talk." Trevor's stomach dropped. Cal went still beside him. Milo held out the paper bag. Inside were flyers for another support group, a different kind, focused on relationship repair and boundaries. "The facilitator from the other group heard about ours," Milo said. "She asked if I'd pass along information. She said it might help with the stuff that comes up after grief." Trevor frowned. "What stuff?" Milo's gaze shifted between them. "The stuff where you start to rebuild your life and then realize you don't know what you're rebuilding for," he said. "The stuff where old patterns, avoidance, self-blame, show up because you've been trained by pain." Trevor felt defensive. He didn't want his behavior diagnosed, but Cal's eyes were thoughtful. Cal said, "Milo, are you asking us to go?" Milo nodded. "I'm not trying to push you," Milo said quickly. "I'm saying, I think you two are circling something, and I don't want you to get hurt because you misunderstand yourselves." Trevor opened his mouth, then closed it. Milo continued, gentler now. "Trevor, you look like you're trying not to want. Cal, you look like you're trying not to risk." Trevor's face warmed. Cal didn't deny it. Milo stepped back. "Look," he said, "I'm not your therapist, but I've been to enough rooms to know when someone's about to leap." Trevor swallowed. "A leap into what?" Milo's smile was tender and slightly sad. "Into being loved without demanding punishment first," he said. Trevor didn't know how to respond. That night, after group ended, Trevor and Cal sat in the parking lot again. This time it felt less like fear and more like decision. Trevor said, "I don't know how to be in something new." Cal nodded. "Then we learn," he said. "We do it slowly." Trevor stared at the ground. "Owen was my first real serious relationship. Not the first time I kissed a man, but the first time I let myself believe I'd be safe." Cal's voice softened. "You let him inside. That was brave." Trevor's laugh was small. "It didn't feel brave. It felt like I was finally coming home." Cal's eyes warmed. "And then you weren't allowed to stay." Trevor nodded. Cal took a breath. "I can't undo what happened to you," he said, "but I can show up consistently. I can choose you in a way that doesn't make you guess." Trevor's throat tightened. "How do I believe that?" Cal's answer was quiet. "You can't believe it in one moment," he said. "You'll see it over time. You'll notice my patterns. You'll notice when I'm afraid and still stay." Trevor looked at Cal. "And if you get scared?" Cal's smile flickered. "I get scared a lot," he admitted. "I just don't run." Trevor's eyes burned again. He realized he was crying just a little, silently. He wiped his cheek quickly, embarrassed. Cal didn't tease him. Cal didn't act like tears were a problem. Cal reached out, and this time his hand brushed Trevor's knuckles. Short, careful contact. Trevor didn't pull away. The next week, they decided to try the other group Milo had mentioned. It wasn't a romance group. It wasn't a dating group. It was an adult room where people talked about patterns and boundaries and learning to repair themselves. They sat together for the first session. A facilitator guided everyone through exercises about attachment, communication, and how to stop turning old pain into new rules. Trevor felt exposed. Being near Cal in that environment made him feel like his emotions were on display, even though nobody else cared. Cal leaned slightly toward him during a break. "Do you want to leave?" Cal asked. Trevor startled. "No," he said quickly. Then, more honestly, "Maybe, but I don't want to run." Cal's eyes softened. "Then we stay until your body believes you're safe," he said. Trevor exhaled. That day, Trevor learned that self-blame wasn't a personality trait. It was a habit. He learned that love didn't require him to prove his worth by suffering. He learned that his fear wasn't evidence that he was broken. It was evidence that he'd been hurt. As the weeks went on, Trevor and Cal grew closer. They didn't jump into labels immediately. They didn't rush into public declarations. Instead, they learned the small, daily things that make love feel real. Cal started texting Trevor after work. "On my way, you okay?" Trevor started answering without overthinking. Trevor started walking into the apartment he shared for group-related events, feeling less like he had to disappear. Cal's grief didn't shrink, but it became less of a storm and more of a weather system he could understand. Trevor watched Cal speak Daniel's name with respect when it came up, not like a wound, but like a memorial. Trevor's grief didn't vanish, but his relationship with it changed. He no longer treated his memories like traps. One afternoon, Trevor found himself at home staring at a box Owen had left behind months ago. Trevor had kept it because throwing it away felt like violence. Keeping it felt like waiting for Owen to come back. In the box were small things. A photo of them at a beach, a hoodie with a coffee stain, a letter Owen had written but never handed him. Trevor held the letter in his hands. He wasn't sure he was brave enough to read it. When Cal came over that evening, Trevor didn't plan to show him the letter. He hadn't even planned to tell anyone about the box. But grief had been teaching Trevor something slowly. Not everything needs to be hidden for protection. Trevor stood in the kitchen with the letter on the table and his hands trembling slightly. Cal noticed immediately. "Trevor," Cal said, stepping closer. "What's wrong?" Trevor's throat tightened. He said the truth before he could talk himself out of it. "I kept something he left behind," Trevor said, "and I haven't opened it, because part of me thinks if I open it, he'll be more gone than he already is." Cal didn't look alarmed. Cal looked steady. Cal said, "You don't have to open it tonight." Trevor swallowed. "I want to, but I'm scared." Cal nodded. "Then we do it with breath. We do it with consent. We do it like you're not alone." Trevor's eyes filled. He sat, and Cal sat beside him, keeping distance that felt respectful. Cal's knee didn't press into Trevor's. Cal's shoulder didn't invade space. Yet Trevor felt Cal's presence like a warm light. Trevor opened the letter. As he read, his face changed. Anger, then sorrow, then something like grief's quiet acceptance. He learned what Owen had never said out loud. Owen had been afraid. Afraid of being fully visible. Afraid of family disappointment and societal consequences. Afraid of building a future with Trevor that would come with constant resistance. But Owen's fear had not been gentle. It had still caused harm. When Trevor finished, his eyes were wet. Cal's voice was quiet. "Did it make you feel better?" Trevor shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "It made me feel seen. And it made me feel like I didn't imagine it, but it didn't undo it." Cal nodded. "That's okay," he said. "Clarity isn't a cure, it's just truth." Trevor let out a shaky breath. Cal reached for the letter and held it with both hands for a moment, as if honoring it. Then he slid it gently back toward Trevor. "You can be angry," Cal said. You can be sad, but you don't have to punish yourself forever. Trevor stared at the table, then he said, I want to stop reading my worth from what he couldn't do. Cal smiled softly. That sentence right there, he said. That's you learning. Trevor leaned forward and rested his forehead against Cal's shoulder for a brief moment. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a declaration. It was just the kind of movement that happened when someone found a place where their body could exhale. Cal didn't move away. Cal's arm stayed at his side, then slowly lifted, offering contact, not demanding it. He rested his hand lightly on Trevor's back. Trevor didn't pull away. They sat there until Trevor's breathing steadied. After that night, Trevor began to change in small, visible ways. He stopped canceling plans last minute. He started texting back immediately instead of crafting delayed replies like he was afraid attention would scorch him. He stopped treating happiness like a suspicious rumor. Cal noticed these changes, but he didn't celebrate them like a victory. He celebrated them like a promise they had kept together. One Saturday, Milo invited them to a community event, an outdoor fundraiser with music and food trucks. Trevor nearly refused. Trevor felt like the world outside group rooms was too loud for his heart. But Cal gently insisted without pushing. You don't have to stay long, Cal said. We can leave whenever. But let's try being in a place where people are living. Trevor agreed. When they arrived, the air smelled like grilled onions and smoke from food trucks. Families moved like bright color through the gray afternoon. People talked loudly. Trevor's pulse increased. Cal held Trevor's hand for the walk to the table where they could pick up tickets. Trevor's hand warmed under Cal's, and Trevor didn't flinch. He still had fear. It was there, but it wasn't steering the car. Later, when music started and a light breeze stirred, Cal pulled Trevor a little closer. Trevor's breath caught. Cal said, Do you want to dance? Trevor laughed under his breath. I don't know if I can. Cal smiled. We can just sway, he said. You don't have to be good at it. You just have to be here. Trevor let Cal lead. They moved slowly, more like a conversation with their bodies than a performance. Trevor's shoulders loosened. He realized he had been holding tension like it was a job. At one point, Trevor glanced up and saw that Milo was watching from a distance with a grin that looked like it had been stitched on. Trevor felt warmth rise in his chest. It wasn't just romance. It was community. It was proof that life could contain joy without erasing pain. Later that night, when they were alone, Trevor sat on Cal's couch and stared at the wall like he was thinking of something far away. Cal asked, What's on your mind? Trevor hesitated, then admitted, I keep thinking about Owen and wondering if I should have known earlier that he couldn't stay. But then I look at you and I think, maybe I did know. Maybe I just didn't want to face the truth because I was afraid of losing him. Cal nodded slowly. That sounds like self-compassion, he said. Trevor shook his head. It's still hard, he said. I don't want to blame myself for trusting him. Cal's gaze warmed. Then don't, he said. Trevor leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. He said, I want to tell you something too. Cal's expression tightened, attentive. Trevor's voice lowered. When I met you, I thought you were just another man in a room full of strangers. Cal smiled faintly. And I was just a guy with grief. Trevor nodded. But then you listened. You didn't rush me. You didn't ask me to be over it. You didn't try to fix my story by rewriting it. Cal's eyes glistened. Trevor continued. You made me feel like I could be honest without being punished. He swallowed. Then he said, I want to try. I want to try something that includes you. Cal's breath caught. It looked like he was bracing for a storm and then deciding to step into warmth anyway. Cal reached for Trevor's hand. This time, contact didn't feel like a test. It felt like agreement. Thank you, Cal said, voice thick. I want that too. Trevor waited for the fear to return. It did, in a small wave, but Cal stayed. Cal didn't disappear into politeness or retreat into uncertainty. Instead, Cal leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to Trevor's forehead. Warm, brief, and tender. The kind that didn't ask for anything sexual, only for safety. Trevor closed his eyes. In that moment, the grief in Trevor didn't vanish. It sat beside him like an old friend who had followed him through too many rooms. And the love, new, imperfect, brave, made space for it. Months later, Ms. Larkin asked everyone in group to share what had changed. Trevor sat in his familiar spot and watched people speak with courage they hadn't had at the beginning. Milo talked about learning to stop apologizing for existing. Cal spoke about how he had stopped treating his partner's death like a punishment he had to earn forgiveness for. When Trevor's turn came, he felt calm in a way that surprised him. He said, "When I came here, I thought love was over because I lost it once. But grief taught me that losing someone doesn't erase your ability to be loved again." He looked at Cal. "I don't pretend my past doesn't hurt," Trevor continued. "I just don't treat that hurt like it gets final say." Cal's smile was soft and proud. After the meeting, Trevor and Cal walked out together. The air was cool. The streetlights flickered. The parking lot looked the same as always, but Trevor's body didn't feel like it was bracing for impact anymore. He and Cal stopped near the sidewalk where trees formed a dark line against the night. Cal turned to Trevor, eyes steady. "I want you to know something," Cal said. Trevor's pulse quickened. Cal continued, "Daniel would have hated that I never told his name, but he also would have wanted me to live, not postpone it, not punish myself. I think he'd be glad I stopped waiting for grief to approve of my happiness." Trevor nodded slowly. Cal added, "And Owen, your Owen, would have wanted you to be real, not afraid, not reduced to what he couldn't give." Trevor's throat tightened. He said, "It's weird how both of our losses taught us the same lesson." Cal smiled. "Loss doesn't only take," he said. "It also teaches you what you'll protect next time." Trevor leaned into Cal's side. Cal didn't hesitate. They stood there quietly, letting the night hold them. Then Trevor said, "Can we keep doing this? The slow part, the honest part, the part where we don't run." Cal's answer came without drama. "Yes," Cal said. "We'll keep doing it." They walked to the cars together. Trevor didn't feel like a man escaping his past anymore. He felt like a man bringing his past with him, not to drown in it, but to honor it while reaching for something tender and new. And when Cal's hand found Trevor's again, it felt like home in the only way Trevor knew how to understand now, not as perfection, but as presence. Hopeful, present, choosing to stay.